Welcome everybody. Bonjour tout le monde. My name is David Miller. I'm the Director for International Diplomacy at C40 Cities and of course the former Mayor of Toronto. It gives me great pleasure today to host this event, a green and just recovery in Canada, conversation with leading cities, convened by C40 Cities. Cet événement est une reprise de le sujet d'une reprise verte et juste au Canada. If you wish French translation, there are subtitles available. Simply scroll along to the right of the screen and you will see language. For those of you not familiar with C40, C40 connects nearly 100 of the mayors of the world's leading cities to take bold climate action, leading the way towards a healthier and more sustainable future. An aim that has become infinitely more challenging and of course, even more important recently. Over the past year, C40 has swiftly reacted as the world was hit by the COVID-19 pandemic and responded by creating a global task force of mayors who've been working together to draw up the principles of a green and just recovery for all. We need our public leaders, the private sector, and civil society to agree if we want to create a climate-safe future that is just and equitable for all. Despite the extreme challenges of the pandemic, at the end of 2020, the Canadian government published a promising climate roadmap to 2030, which demonstrated their ambition in the face of increasing adversity. Inspired by this, we at C40 looked into what we could do to support bold climate action in Canada, and we have researched how the budget of the Canadian government, to be published later this month, could assist the objectives stated to address climate change by seizing opportunities and leveraging existing strengths of our cities. To launch this report and open up discussions at a regional, national, and international level, we have gathered together mayors from leading Canadian and US cities, along with climate experts and special guests who will shine a light on specific actions, opportunities, and ongoing collaborations that will help us reach our climate goals. Without any further introduction, I'm glad to now turn over the podium to my colleague, the Director of Knowledge and Learning at C40, Dr. Rachel Huxley, who will present our report, The Case for an Urban, Green and Just Recovery in Canada. Rachel, over to you.
Thank you, David. It's a pleasure to be part of this important discussion and to present our research. As everyone is well aware, we are facing the unprecedented crises of climate and COVID. We are currently on track for 3 degrees or more of global heating. And as well as the tragic health consequences from the pandemic, we have suffered a precipitous drop in GDP and employment. So the need to respond to these crises couldn't be clearer. The good news is that the research shows this can be a moment for transformational change. And cities have a leading role to play in this. We analysed the potential benefits from 12 major Canadian cities taking bold action to tackle both the climate and COVID crises. This analysis shows that city-led action is pivotal in delivering the recovery, not only cutting carbon, but also boosting employment and improving health. The key findings from the research show that these major cities, by leading on ambitious climate action, could reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 2/3 compared to business as usual, helping to put Canada on course for its 1.5 degree target. This bold climate action would also support and create over 2.9 million jobs by 2030 across the 12 cities and their supply chain. And this action will also have significant health benefits, reducing air pollution by up to 32%, which could prevent nearly 4,000 premature deaths over the next decade. So the benefits are clear, but so too is the scale and the urgency of the challenge. We looked at the impact of delay, comparing investing and acting over the next 5 to 10 years with slower investment and action over the next 7 to 15 years. And the results show that we must act now. There is a clear cost from delay in terms of both lives and climate. The graph on the left shows how many fewer lives are saved, and the graph on the right shows that with slower action, cities cannot achieve their ambitions around 1.5 degrees. It is clear that climate delay, not denial, is the big challenge we face now. So moving on from the headline results to the specifics, the research points to 4 priority action areas. First, it shows clearly that investing in greening buildings provides a triple win, generating the largest share of jobs and leading to the biggest decrease in air pollution, as well as substantial GHG emission reductions. Secondly, the research shows that rapidly decarbonising the grid is critical to meeting climate targets. For cities which currently have higher carbon grids, we modelled the phase out of coal to renewables and kept the level of gas constant. This remaining gas leads to GHG emissions around 2.5 times higher than a fully renewable grid. Cities simply cannot meet their climate goals without the support of other orders of government to decarbonise their electricity supply. Thirdly, investing in sustainable transport is fundamental. We need to invest in mass transit to keep our cities moving and functioning, and to ensure equitable access to service and jobs. Investment in walking and cycling generates health benefits, extending life expectancy by between 2.1 and 3.6 months. And switching to majority zero emission vehicles is necessary to reach climate targets and clean our air. Investments in sustainable transport also generate substantial employment opportunities, supporting and creating around 1.2 million jobs. Finally, our research points to the important role of urban nature-based solutions, not only by improving health and well-being, but also through generating employment opportunities and creating more resilient cities. So what support is required in each of these areas to help cities deliver a green and just recovery? For buildings, the current commitments towards energy efficiency are the right direction of travel, but will only support retrofit for around 0.2 to 0.3% of the housing stock annually, whereas we estimate a rate of 6.5% per year is needed. So significant federal support through both bold policy and investment will be needed to catalyse this scale up. For grid decarbonisation, the great work to rapidly phase out coal must continue. And importantly, this coal needs to be replaced with renewables, not gas. Work to phase out gas should start now. We recognise the challenges of grid resilience and storage, but the research clearly shows the impact of remaining gas in keeping GHG emissions high. Federal government needs to support provinces and cities to start now to phase out gas from both electricity and heating buildings. For sustainable transport, the current funding for 5,000 electric buses is welcome, but we would encourage further support on the basis that the 12 cities in this study alone have a fleet of around 20,000 buses. For cars, our analysis indicates that approximately 75% of vehicles need to be zero emissions by 2030. This requires an average replacement rate of 5% per year. Given the current level of electric vehicles around 0.5%, significant federal support is needed to ramp this up. For urban nature-based solutions, the message is simple. Don't forget cities when investing in nature. We need to weave green spaces into the fabric of our cities, and by doing so, we can ensure equitable access to nature for all. The science and the numbers are clear. Our research shows that a green and just recovery is possible, but only with greatly increased ambition and investment. Cities can and are delivering, but need more support from federal government to realise truly transformational change. Now is the moment we need to act. How we respond to the dual crisis of climate and COVID will determine our immediate and our long-term prosperity. Thank you very much. Full details of the research are available on the C40 Knowledge Hub.
Thank you very much, Dr. Huxley, for that compelling case for significant and massive investment now in Canada's cities to ensure a green and just recovery. I'd like now to introduce City Councillor Ben Henderson, who is the chair of the FCM Green Municipal Fund, for his remarks. Councillor, you have the floor.
Great, thank you very much, David. So I wanted to start with a bit of background. The Federation of Canadian Municipalities, FCM, unites 2,000 cities and communities of all sizes, representing more than 90% of Canadians. Municipalities are the level of government closest to the places where people work, raise their families, manage businesses, and live out the realities of the COVID-19 crisis. And municipal leaders have proven they can turn national investments into real outcomes, whether that is responding to the global pandemic, creating jobs and healthy communities, or raising the level of ambition in dealing with climate change. To help support municipalities achieve these objectives, for 20 years, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities has done this through its Green Municipal Fund, GMF. GMF is part endowment, part revolving fund created by an investment from the Government of Canada that is now up to $1.6 billion. Over those 20 years, through a combination of grants, low-cost loans, and capacity building, it has helped Canadian municipalities switch to innovative and sustainable practices and replicate successes from lessons learned. To date, we've funded more than 1,360 projects and are scaling hundreds of proven solutions in 5 sectors across Canada: energy, transportation, waste, water, and brownfield redevelopment. We've approved more than $946 million in sustainability initiatives and reduced GHGs by 2.7 million tons. To give an example, just this week, the Government of Canada and FCM announced the National Capital Region's first net zero community, a $23 million investment, which will create a district energy system for Ottawa-Gatineau's carbon neutral Zibi waterfront development. The district energy system for this 34-acre brownfield site will eliminate greenhouse gas emissions from building, heating, and cooling operations. Beyond projects like this in the core fund, this past year, GMF has also announced the creation of 3 new innovative funding offerings. The first, community efficiency financing, empowers low-rise residential property owners to invest in energy efficiency and renewable energy upgrades. As an example, through this funding offer, this past December, the Government of Canada, FCM, and the City of Toronto announced funding of over $14.5 million for a home energy loan program, which will help homeowners retrofit existing homes with energy efficiency measures and/or renewable energy sources. The second new program is the Sustainable Affordable Housing Program, which is designed to enable energy efficient retrofit programs and new builds in the affordable housing sector. This program is receiving excellent feedback from the community housing sector for its potential to generate triple bottom line benefits, including reducing energy and GHG intensity, increasing energy and housing affordability, and improving building quality and increasing comfort, health, and quality for the life of the residents. And the third new funding offer is the Low Carbon Cities Canada LC3 Fund. It funds a partnership with 6 organizations across Canada in 7 large city regions. The Atmospheric Fund in the Greater Toronto and Hamilton area, and centers in the Montreal metropolitan community, in Edmonton, in Calgary, in Ottawa, Vancouver, and the Halifax region. $156 million has been transferred to these low carbon city centers across Canada to support unique projects to address the climate crisis while improving public health and the local economies. With municipalities influencing half of all emissions, local action is key to achieving net zero by 2050. To this end, we're very pleased to see the Government of Canada recently announced $14.9 billion for public transit over the next 8 years, including permanent funding of $3 billion per year for Canadian communities beginning in 2026-27. Funding for active transportation and rural transit was also announced. Thanks to the Government of Canada and Minister McKenna, who I know is in this meeting in particular, these investments respond to long-standing advocacy from FCN and Canada's local governments. This is also an opportunity to scale up a wider range of proven municipal initiatives that are already creating jobs and reducing emissions. As GMF Council Chair, I know that the GMF is a ready-made economic recovery partner with deep expertise and links into cities and communities across the country. For 20 years, GMF has already been helping municipalities create jobs, reduce pollution, and is uniquely positioned to help Canada deliver on its climate change commitments through additional targeted investments in transportation, waste, energy, and other key sectors. FCM sees huge opportunities as well in the recommitment of support through proven funding tools like the Federal Gas Tax Fund, which will now be doubled in size this coming year, and with the Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund, which will help municipalities invest in transit, climate action projects, and invest in community resilience and climate adaptations. Municipalities are ready to lead at a green and just recovery that creates jobs, saves lives, and helps Canada achieve net zero GHG emissions. We're looking forward to the upcoming federal budget to help accelerate and deepen climate action at the local level. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Henderson, and for your leadership. The creativity and excellence in investment strategy from the Green Municipal Fund is really a world-leading example. I'd now like to ask our host, Mayor Don Iveson, who's been leading a great effort in the City of Edmonton to speak, particularly about the new energy transition strategy aligned with the targets of the Paris Agreement. Mayor Iveson, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much, David. And thank you, a special shout out to Councillor Henderson, my longtime colleague here from Edmonton, on the excellent work that the Green Municipal Fund and the Federation of Canadian Municipalities has been doing. You know, Edmonton helped start the original Partners for Climate Protection work in 1992, and I'm proud that our city has been part of that work since I was 13, in fact, and Ben carries on that work on our behalf so ably. So thank you for those comments, Ben, and your leadership. So clearly, given how long we've been at this, we all need to pick up the pace. And thank you to Dr. Huxley and to C40 for this research. The urgency and the opportunity are very well aligned with our updated community energy transition strategy, which happens to be coming to City Council next week. Now, our strategy is designed to accelerate positive change in 4 transformational areas. First is renewable and resilient energy transition. Second is emission neutral buildings. Third is low carbon city and transportation. And fourth is carbon capture and nature-based solutions. Now, we have long pursued a market transformation approach here in Edmonton with a risk and cost avoidance rationale. But as this report lays out, this is also where the COVID recovery jobs that we badly need can be had, as well as better human and ecological health outcomes as we meet our urgent and shared climate goals in accordance with the Paris Agreement. Now, I'm proud to say that Edmonton is already a leader in greenhouse gas accounting, being one of the few cities in the world that fully inventories all of our emissions annually and accounts for both our production emissions and carbon sinks. Next up, we'll be adopting a carbon budget target. And as we have in our recent city plan, and incorporating emissions factors into planning and priorities decision-making that will ensure the city continues to lead in this carbon accounting area. In fact, incorporating carbon accounting in our existing financial processes, such as our 10-year capital infrastructure investment outlook and our priority-based operating budgeting, will be a critical next step to seamlessly integrating carbon accounting within the city's financial processes, starting in our next 2023 to 26 multi-year budget cycle. Now, to my knowledge, we are one of the first, if not the first, Canadian cities to commit to carbon budgeting. And yesterday, I actually introduced a motion to my neighboring mayors at our regional board to pursue a metropolitan carbon budget and regionally harmonized climate and energy transition approach. So carbon budgeting and accounting at a municipal and certainly at a regional level is bleeding edge work. And we'll continue to learn and refine as we implement the framework, but we need to make a smart transition, conserve within our financial, carbon, and ecological constraints, and come out ahead after COVID. Now, that's a lot to manage. But as green building experts here in Edmonton, and with a massive low carbon hydrogen economy potential and a proud heritage as energy problem solvers here in the heart of Canada's traditional energy economy, I'm truly hopeful that our city can remain prosperous through this transition if we get it right. So just for some examples, with Shell's Scotford complex, which is the world's most energy efficient refinery, and Lehigh's carbon neutral cement plant project, which we're providing refuse derived fuel for, we have competitive and relevant industrial innovations right here in our region to contribute as well. Now, no doubt, climate change is a real threat. Keeps me up at night. But dealing with it head on is an unprecedented jobs and investment opportunity, and COVID recovery has only created more urgency for us. So research like this helps us make the case to federal and provincial governments and to our own taxpayers and industry partners so that we can help optimize all of our efforts here at the local level on the ground. And so I'm so pleased to be joined today by a number of excellent fellow mayors. Mon ami la mairesse Plante de la Ville de Montréal, a city with longstanding leadership in building sustainable and just cities as part of the C40, and a very strong voice from our table at the Canadian Big City Mayors. Bienvenue, Valérie. And Mayors Peduto from Pittsburgh and Sylvester from Houston. Energy cities who see the potential of the transition, and among the hundreds of mayors who I have to say thank you to for staying committed to Paris throughout the previous 4 years in the United States. And that's all I'll say about that. And finally, to Mayor Bloomberg, who's been a champion of data and science and running the numbers to build better and more prosperous and healthier cities. And as he likes to say, in God we trust, all others bring data. And this is important data for us here to consider, to raise the level of debate in our country. And so thank you for supporting this work, Mike. Finally, it's a pleasure to be with you all here to make the case for a green and just recovery from COVID here in Canada. And thank you to Minister McKenna for joining us to hear this research and our comments as well. Merci à tout le monde.
Thank you very much, Mayor Iveson. Merci beaucoup pour votre présentation. I'd now like to share a message from Mayor Mike Bloomberg. Among his many responsibilities, Mike holds the title of UN Special Envoy for Climate Ambition and Solution and Global Ambassador for the Race to Zero, which he's about to tell us more about. Mayor Bloomberg, over to you.
Cities are at the center of our efforts to fight crises like COVID-19 and climate change. And new research from C40 shows why. Investing in cities is one of the best ways to create jobs, reduce inequality, improve air quality, and fight climate change. As nations develop economic recovery policies, supporting cities and mayors should be a top priority. Cities are already leading by example to show that economic strength and climate action go hand in hand, including many cities across the United States and Canada. They're passing clean energy commitments that will create good new jobs, introducing electric buses and other important measures, and proving the power of local climate actions. As we approach COP26 later this year, more cities can show their ambition by joining the Race to Zero campaign. And national governments can show their own commitment to this work by supporting cities as part of their green stimulus and recovery spending. Right now, we have a real opportunity to make progress, building back from the pandemic and fighting climate change. We don't have a moment to waste, and together we can get it done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor Bloomberg. We encourage Canadian cities to participate in the Race to Zero, and there'll be more information available afterwards through the C40 website. We're now going to move to continue our discussion with the august group of mayors introduced by Mayor Iveson. Julian Goodman, editor at Bloomberg Green, is today's moderator and will be asking all of the pertinent questions. Over to you, Julian.
Thank you so much, David, and to C40 for inviting me to be involved with this event. Merci beaucoup et bonjour à tout le monde. To start, I'm going to crib from a piece that we actually are publishing in a couple of weeks about the future of cities and climate change. This is written by some of my wonderful colleagues. If the history of humanity is the history of cities, then our future hangs on their fate. Cities are uniquely vulnerable to climate change. They're built of steel and cement and glass, and all of these things absorb heat and repel water, which is basically exactly what we don't want them to do in a world where temperatures are rising and seas are rising along with them. A reasonable person could look at this and say, take me to the countryside, I'll be safer there. But the reality isn't quite so simple. In no small part because cities are so vulnerable to climate change, they're at the forefront of engineering solutions to the climate crisis. The COVID-19 recovery is one of the best opportunities we have to shape the future of cities for a climate-changed world. As C40's new report puts it, massive national investment in a city-led green and just recovery has the power to catalyze transformational economic, health, and climate benefits. This recovery period presents more than an opportunity to invest in a green future, however. It underlines the necessity of doing so. Without a green and just recovery, Canada and the US and the rest of the world faces a much more precarious future. The climate crisis is something we'll have to address sooner or later, and sooner will be a lot easier. To talk about the necessity and potential of a green and just recovery for Canadian cities, I'm thrilled to have with me mayors from both sides of the 49th parallel. Mayor Don Iveson, who we've already heard of Edmonton, Mayor William Peduto of Pittsburgh, Mayor Valérie Plante of Montreal, and Mayor Sylvester Turner of Houston. Welcome to everybody. I'm thrilled to be here. So Mayor Plante, let's start with you. So many of the policy responses we've talked about today require strong collaboration between cities and federal government. Mayor Plante, what support does Montreal need from Ottawa in order to actually achieve an inclusive green recovery?
Thank you so much for this great question, and it's my pleasure to be with so many colleagues. And Minister McKenna, it's great to, hello Catherine. I'm glad that you could be with us. So much needs to be done in terms of having a green and just recovery, and working with the C40 network for the Mayoral Task Force for a green and just recovery has been very helpful. I think that it's important to collaborate, to share initiatives, to build trust, and also to be solidarity to one another. And this is what the C40 task force has been doing even before. The C40 is such a great network in making sure that we stay solidaire and we move forward with a very strong and bold agenda into fighting climate change. So we know that the pandemic has created even more tension on so many levels, whatever it's on inequalities, when we think about housing, about finding a job, food security, but it also had a big impact on our plans in fighting climate change. And for that, it is important not only that we talk to each other and we collaborate, but also that we speak to other levels of government. And in that sense, I have to say that myself and also all my colleagues, and I want to salute my colleague Don Iveson for that, but and we have been sharing our thoughts and our hopes and our expectation to the federal government. And I'm glad to say that it's been a great answer. We know that the federal government truly believes that we need to take this opportunity, because the COVID has been a disaster. It's a huge crisis on so many levels, like I was saying, but I feel like it's also an opportunity for us to say, let's not do it like before. Let's not get out of this crisis like before. Let's think outside of the box. And so speaking with my colleagues at the federal level, and we've had great answers. Few examples here and there, I'm sure my colleague can also speak to that. But the investment of the federal government into public transportation, where we know that in Canada, this is where we can get so many, we can reduce our green gas emission by far, because this is where it is this is where there's the most green gas emission, if I could say. So 15 billion being implemented that is going to be injected in creating a bigger network of public transport is huge. 2.5 billion around electrification, which is also very needed. And I also want to speak to the program that was put together to support urgent housing. Because again, we know that in time of crisis, and I sometimes say to my population when I speak out loud about the COVID, I say, sometimes I feel this is almost like a repetition. Like it's also, before you have the opening of a theater play, I'm sorry, because I don't know how to say in English, but you have the répétition générale. It's the last practice you do before the show. I almost feel like this is almost like a vision of what could happen in the future if we don't act properly and strongly about climate change. And we know that during the COVID, it was the people at the bottom of the scale of the ladder who paid the biggest price. So we have a responsibility, a social responsibility, a responsibility from our society, but from the world, to find new ways and to be very proactive. So both, I want to thank the federal government, but I also definitely want to say that the task force created by the C40 did help me as mayor, but also I think it gave us a stronger voice in demanding other level of government. You got to do something. Help us make this world better, and use this crisis, this sad event, as a way to push forward the climate change agenda.
Thank you so much. I love that metaphor. We call it a dress rehearsal in English.
Oh, thank you. Dress rehearsal.
Yes,
thank
of course,
you.
of course. Mayor Iveson, same question to you. What about in Edmonton? You know, where is it most critical for you to have that federal support?
Well, all across the board, because in fact, as the northernmost major Canadian city at 53 degrees latitude, we're actually starting to see those extreme weather changes hit our part of the country and the north sooner than other places that are further from the poles. And so we've seen between wildfires and flooding events, massive insurable losses costing billions of dollars to both taxpayers and insurance ratepayers going forward here in our part of the country. And so there's certainly an ongoing need for support for adaptation, but we know that the costs of that and the losses to households and industry and governments are only going to grow exponentially if we don't take strong mitigation action here. So we have to respond to the changing climate today while mitigating those future risks going forward. And we've done a lot of work on that from a flood perspective on drainage here in the city, and proud that we've attained a B+, which is not perfect. And this recovering perfectionist still isn't happy with that, but it's the best grade in the country for flood preparedness. So a lot of work on disaster mitigation and adaptation. But really, if we don't get this mitigation play right, if we don't crash emissions within the next decade, especially in higher carbon cities like ours, then we are going to miss the boat. And that's a question of generational justice. I was just meeting with Edmonton's youth climate delegation yesterday in advance of our deliberations next week, and hearing and talking to young people about their fear. At the same time, being able to reassure is motivating, but at the same time, being able to reassure them that this government, and we believe the federal government and the world now takes this issue very seriously. It's great to have a federal government in the United States doing that too. Bill and Sylvester may have some more to say about that, but because it unlocks tremendous potential and now competition. And I think the industry opportunities here, the jobs for these young people, the chance to bounce back from COVID while reducing GHG emissions. And this is a part of the country that was struggling because of a downturn and shift in the energy markets. So we were in recession before COVID. So it's really a double whammy for us at this point. So we need those strong investments to make the pivot. And I see just phenomenal opportunity here to drive prosperity, and particularly in the hydrogen economy, for example, around here, a lot of transferable skills from traditional oil and gas to carbon neutral blue hydrogen, because it's a lot of the same kind of infrastructure. So adaptable skills and a future for people who are out of work and angry right now and upset because of COVID. I think our region needs that hope. And I think really leaning into this with strong leadership from all orders of government, pulling in the right direction to make sure that there's a future for our kids. I think there's no time like the present. In fact, there was no time like the present 28 years ago when we started Partners for Climate Protection, but the clock is ticking now. And even though this is an energy producing region and people make certain assumptions, and I'm sure Mayor Turner and Mayor Peduto could speak to this too, that people in our regions don't care about climate. More than 3/4 of Edmontonians believe the science and think we need to take urgent action. And this is right in the heart of oil country here in Canada. And so, our public has said very firmly, election after election, we need to get on with this. And we're now seeing here all of the economic opportunities that come with it. And so I think people are on board for that. And we can make not just a just, but potentially a net positive transition in terms of human health, in terms of ecological health, and in terms of prosperity.
I completely agree. And it's one of the most fascinating things about covering this moment in history is that the potential here, not just on climate change, but also economically, is so huge. Mayor, obviously you stole my transition to Mayor Turner. Mayor Turner, Houston has a past that's intimately tied in with fossil energy. So what can you tell us about Houston's clean energy transition plan, and how will you manage that transition?
Well, I would take, and it's good to be with you, Jillian, and good to be with all of these outstanding mayors and David, and certainly Minister McKenna. It is good to see you again, and I owe you a visit. You came to visit me. Look, let me just say that in the last 6 years, the city of Houston has faced 4 500-year flooding events, major events, with the last big one being Hurricane Harvey in 2017. More rain fell on this city than on any other city in North America. That was a game changer, not just for people living in the city, but it was a game changer for the energy sector as well. Look, Houston has been built with oil and gas, fossil fuels. And now we talk about being the energy capital of the world, and we're very proud of it. But we also we recognize that these storms are coming with greater frequency and greater intensity. And after Hurricane Harvey, there was a strong push to develop the city's first ever climate action plan. And I will tell you, it is a science-based, community-driven plan in collaboration with environmentalists, with people who live in our city, with the industry. There was at the time no federal mandate, there was no state mandate. So it required collaboration with all sectors, including the energy community. And with this plan, for example, contracting with energy companies, the city of Houston, for example, all of its facilities are now 100% powered by renewables. And we are proud of that. The city of Houston utilizes more renewables than any other city in the United States. And we are proud of that. Working with the energy sector, we are looking at a landfill, for example, in the city of Houston, 240 acres, opened in 1930s, closed in 1970, contaminated for 50 years. And we're looking at turning that into one of the largest urban solar farms in the United States. There are 4 pillars to our climate action plan. Energy transition being a major one, electrifying our transportation sector, building optimization, as well as material waste management. But we recognize that in being the energy capital of the world, we also need to take the steps in leading in energy transition. And that's why the push towards utilization of more renewables. And we are showcasing that by starting with our city facilities and then asking the energy sector to come aboard. Now, let me quickly say, we're not trying to move away from the energy sector. That's who Houston has been. But we are working with them to move the energy sector forward. And so now we are focusing, for example, on clean tech companies. And a part of the climate action plan is developing 50 new 2.0 energy companies by 2025. We're working with Greentown Labs for that is expanded from the Boston area, now in the city of Houston. On Earth Day, they will be cutting the ribbon and opening that up. We're working with the energy sectors, working with Rice University, their Carbon Hub, and University of Houston Carbon Management Program, along with Greentown Labs and others. We're looking at electrifying our public and private fleet by 2030, 30% of all of our vehicles to be electrified. We recognize we need to work with the federal administration, with the Biden administration, as they move to put out 500,000 electric charge stations, and we hope that will occur. And so when you add in the electrification of our fleet, working to establish clean tech companies, a greater push for renewables across the board, we believe that the energy sector can continue to be a proud piece of the city's culture and history, but we also want to lead in the energy transition. And if we can get it right here in the city of Houston, in the energy capital of the world, if we can get it right here, it will not only have a local impact, but it will have a worldwide impact as well. And if you can do it in the city of Houston, we believe it can be done anywhere.
Thank you so much, Mayor Turner. And also, Mayor Peduto, Pittsburgh also intimately tied in with fossil energy. You've been working on your own city's climate action plan for a few years now. What from your experience do you think might inform other cities like Houston around the world, even as they attempt to reduce emissions as well and transition away from fossil fuels? And how are you using the latest round of COVID stimulus from our federal government to help with that?
Well, first of all, Jillian, thank you for hosting this, and to my fellow elected officials and fellow mayors, it's great to see you. To Mayor Iveson, I look forward to having you, Sarah, and your kids come visit us in Pittsburgh once we can cross borders again. You know, Pittsburgh is, well, let me start by saying this. We are at a critical juncture for North America. And the one thing that binds our cities together is that we have been regionally the areas where energy has been produced. In Pittsburgh, it was coal that was first mined along the shores of the Monongahela River. It was oil that was discovered 50 miles north of Pittsburgh along the Allegheny. And we sit on one of the largest reserves of natural gas in the world. Yet we understand that our future is not wedded to our past, that there needs to be an opportunity in order to be able to change the narrative. I mean, think about it. Last year in this country, climate change was defined as conspiracy. Within the past few months, we've been able to change the narrative to jobs. And that's really where we need to be able to focus. If we're going to win the hearts and the minds of those that worked in the fossil fuel industry, of those that helped to build both of our countries, of those who have stakes in the communities that have long been fueled by the fossil fuel economy, then we have to be able to translate the conversation. We need to be able to specifically look at our regions and to be able to show where the transfer to renewable energy will be a benefit and not a harsh impact. 2 years ago, Pittsburgh was targeted, as Mayor Turner had stated, about climate change and how the coastal areas of southern United States have been pounded by hurricanes, where 100-year storms are now every year. The industry of the petrochemical industry that has been a large contributor to this felt that they needed to move to get away from the climate change effects. And they targeted the Ohio Valley, and they targeted our region where there's an overabundance from over drilling of natural gas. And they wanted to be able to crack that gas in order to be able to make plastic. Now, Pittsburgh's economy has shifted quite a bit, but it hasn't shifted to plastic. And we viewed it not only as a threat to our environmental health, our public health, but also an opportunity cost to our new economy. We've paid the price. We've paid the price with our air and our water through the second and third industrial revolution. And we wanted to find a way in order to be able to not have to play defense to stop an industry from coming in. Together, mayors united. The mayors of Huntington and Morgantown, West Virginia, the mayors of Columbus and Cincinnati, Dayton and Youngstown, Ohio, the mayor of Louisville, Kentucky, and Pittsburgh, those that make up the Ohio Valley and Northern Appalachia, said we can do better. And they worked with the University of Pittsburgh and the University of Massachusetts in Amherst and created the Marshall Plan for Middle America, a way to be able to transfer to renewable energy and meet our Paris climate responsibilities. But in the process, instead of losing 100,000 jobs through that transition, creating 400,000. As you look at the cities that are gathered here, we are at this critical moment in the history of North America, in between Houston and Montreal, in Edmonton, in Pittsburgh. We can redefine the critical acts that are needed to address climate change and do it in a way that is just not just environmental justice, but social justice and economic justice as well.
So much of the discussion, both from Dr. Huxley and from, this fantastic group of mayors today has been about the fringe benefits of climate action, which, it's so compelling and such an interesting case for making these changes to our economies. Mayor Plante, you recently launched the Plan Climat for Montreal, and I was hoping that you could speak to the community benefits that you anticipate from that as well.
Yes, of course. Thank you. Well, we decided to present our first climate plan, even though we were dealing in the middle of COVID. But for us, it was important to move forward for the reasons that I've explained before. I don't know if people remember, but well, probably not. People in the States probably don't remember that, but we've had the chance to have Greta Thunberg being with us 2 years ago, and we were 500,000 people walking the streets of Montreal requesting big changes from our deciders, whatever they're at the municipal, provincial, and federal level. So I wanted to present this climate plan, which is quite ambitious. Our first goal is to reduce our green gas emission by 55% by 2030. That's like tomorrow, and to be carbon neutral by 2050. So this is quite, like I said, ambitious, but there's ways to reach that. And if I connect to your question about how does those objectives, because those are numbers, but how do we make sure that it's beneficial for the planet, but it's also beneficial for our communities, our population. I think this is one of the big challenge we have to find. We have to reach ways for people to jump in and to make sacrifices sometime if there's benefits, if it's interesting for them. So I want to say that in our climate plan, our goal is to increase the number of green spaces. And during the pandemic, we've seen how much Montrealers, people that lives in a very dense city, they don't necessarily have a backyard, they don't have a balcony, so they go in parks, and they've been quite popular. So we've decided to move forward with a very ambitious plan. So we commit to plant 500,000 trees by 2030, and really to increase the proportion of protected land by from 6 to 10% in the next coming years. And one of the things, and it's interesting because when I was my first meeting with C40, when I got elected mayor 4 years ago, I was on stage in Chicago, and I actually said that one of my goals was to protect the last green lands existing in Montreal to create a huge municipal park. Well, and it was supposed to be developed for housing, and it would have been what a sad loss, and now it's done. So with the help of the federal government as well, we've been able to protect this huge green park, which will be 8 times the size of Central Park. So this is beneficial for the community, and people are proud to say that we save lands. We're an island, so we need to have those. Greenland is a way to make it as almost like a sponge, so it's very useful to protect our territory, our land. So things like that is fantastic to create some momentum and for people to be willing to, like I was saying, to do the sacrifices. Also, Montreal is well recognized for his bike lanes, and to me, while we're working on public transport, one thing that a city can do, and Montreal is doing it, is to create safe bike paths, not only for security, but also to encourage people to use a different way of going around. And though it's quite cold in Montreal, I have to say, people bike all year long, and we are creating express bike network, an extra 184 kilometers of protected bike lane on big streets, very busy streets, so people can go from one way to another in a safe way. And finally, I just want to say that in our plan, we've decided to create, there's land that belongs to the city of Montreal. Well, we will be creating housing, but it will be the first carbon neutral eco park. So there's a possibility of creating about 10,000 housing units, and it's ours. So we want to make it affordable for social housing, having parks, but also making it carbon neutral. So there's so many things, other things I could say, but I guess I want to emphasize the need to create benefits and things that people can be proud of, so we can move forward with difficult choices that we all have to do, and especially for deciders like in the role that we have.
Absolutely. Mayor Turner, you referenced Hurricane Harvey. Another part of obviously investing in climate change mitigation is investing in adaptation and resilience. Can you speak to the benefits that Houston will gain from investing in infrastructure to gird against the Hurricane Harveys of the future?
And it is building for the future. David, Houston has been a part of C40 for at least 10 years. In that decade, there have been many storms. We just faced a major winter storm in February that was foreseeable and the impact preventable. But for example, the policymakers, even in the last 10 years, never acknowledged climate change. And if you don't acknowledge climate change, it's hard to take the necessary steps to prevent it from occurring and to mitigate your risk. And a part of, we passed the Resilient Houston Plan in February of last year. The Climate Action Plan is a vital part of it, and which means that we want to build a city that's better, stronger, and more resilient. So such that we don't have to repeat the same mistakes and experience the same level of losses and risks that we've experienced in the past. The climate, the economy, your health, quality of life, these are elements that all intersect. And one thing that I'm very, very focused on and sensitive to, and that is many people in, let's say, low-income communities and communities of color, oftentimes are impacted from each one of these shocks and stresses. For COVID-19, communities of color, low-income communities were very disproportionately hit. When areas flood, they're disproportionately hit. So climate change has a direct impact on people who are already on the margins. And so in building a resilient community, you focus not just on energy transition, you focus on building optimization. You focus on all of the things that these communities and these people need in order to better prepare themselves for tomorrow, not yesterday. So you don't build back the same, you build back better, okay? Which means you have to acknowledge that climate change is real. You have to recognize that a part of that strategy is building a resilient community, putting people in a better place in terms of how to deal with these inequities that exist. And when I focus, for example, on taking that landfill in Sunnyside, that's a low-income community that's been held down by this landfill for the last 50 years. But when you turn that into, for example, the largest urban solar farm in the country, you're generating enough power to power 5,000 homes. You're taking 120 million pounds of carbon, you're offsetting that. You're investing $70 million plus in that community, and you're creating green jobs, and you're revitalizing those communities. That's building a resilient community, but it's factoring in equity and resilience at the front end and not at the back end. And that's what we are attempting to do in this city. And I think that's what mayors across the globe are also attempting to do as we address climate change and building resilient communities.
Thank you so much. And Mayor Peduto, this also makes me think of the Marshall Plan for Middle America that you mentioned. I was hoping you could speak a little bit more to that. What would that look like? You know, what lessons are there for other cities, both in the US and in Canada? And you know, just sort of basically, why does the Middle America need a Marshall Plan?
Again, you know, as we look at this transition, there will be areas that will be the most impacted. The areas that have become the most dependent upon fossil fuel will be the areas that, unless we have a proactive national strategy to be able to assist, will be the ones that will be left behind. And there is no reason, as Mayor Ivinson said, that the transference of the type of skills and training of the workers who build our countries through the fossil fuel economy can't be directly benefited by the transference to the renewable economy. I think, again, it is extremely important, especially in post-industrial cities, that we change that narrative and that we allow people to understand that this could be an economic boom. Now, the Marshall Plan goes into specifics about how that can be distributed. There's going to be a need for additional workforce development. There's going to be a need for direct partnerships, public-private partnerships with those companies that have been around for 100 years in the fossil fuel industry through innovation to be able to expand. Just yesterday, we had a natural gas company in southwestern Pennsylvania purchase a hydrogen company to be able to expand upon their opportunities in the hydrogen industry. A gas company is now an energy company. And that type of opportunity needs to be there. And there will be a need for federal assistance. And in the United States, tax abatement programs at the statewide level. But that investment also requires private equity. So if we were to look at our region and to identify those companies that have been based upon coal and gas, we can see where in each of these cities that I mentioned before, there's one commonality of why we bonded together. Well, there's a couple. First, we all like each other. We get along as mayors. But the second one is we all have a research facility within our city. So if you're looking at Huntington, you got Marshall University, West Virginia University, University of Pittsburgh, Carnegie Mellon, all throughout the University of Louisville, Ohio State. That is the key ingredient for the 21st century economy in order to help these companies to innovate to become more complete energy companies. Last week, I met with the Consul General of Quebec, and Quebec was interested in having opportunities for hydro companies to pitch to our area and to our region. There's no reason the Ohio Valley could not be a hydro and hydrogen valley. And we can make the transference from blue hydrogen to green hydrogen. It's an economic opportunity for these areas. And like I said before, that needs to come from the heartland. I understand that in our country, a lot of the conversation of the transference to renewable energy is coming from the coasts. They have very little to lose. What really needs to happen is the conversation really coming from those areas that help to build both of our countries through a fossil fuel industry.
Mm-hmm. And Mayor Iveson, we're actually running a few minutes behind, so I'm hoping you can close this out briefly. How transferable are Edmonton's experiences, and how can Canadian cities, you know, as Mayor Peduto was saying, best share knowledge among themselves to achieve climate goals?
Well, first of all, through participation in networks like this, C40 has been very generous, even though we're not one of the 40, and we're grateful for that. Their connection to FCM, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, our national group, which serves urban and rural, north and south, east and west, English and French. So we're one big happy municipal family here. But these networks are so important. And the Green Municipal Fund goes further to, as Ben said, you know, measuring results and sharing best practices. It's allowed a ton of prototyping in low carbon buildings, waste to energy, district energy systems, you name it, across the country. And those are the scalable solutions we now need to scale up with a mixture of grant funding for certain things whose economics are sort of in the public good realm, public returns on investment, but also to facilitate the things that have financeable returns. And I was just for Catherine's benefit, I was looking next week. We're going to be approving an infrastructure bank loan for $14 million for electric bus purchase. And I think we'll be the first to use that credit facility, because so many of these moves, even before a price on carbon, make sense over time to finance. And with proper carbon pricing, which we're going to have in this country now, for sure, so many of these things, the benefits accelerate and are financeable. And so especially that goes on retrofits. And to Bill's point, you know, folks who've been building houses for 20 or 30 or 50 years have the skills to build net zero houses and passive houses, and many of them want to. It's just that the regulatory floor needs to be moved up and the incentives and financing tools need to be modernized. You know, I do think our mortgage rules should reflect the energy efficiency of a home. We finance really leaky houses right now as if they're the same as passive houses. That's a massive policy gap that could be filled. So getting the financing right for all these things that make sense over time will help unlock those jobs. And I think cities have done a tremendous amount of work to show the way by respecting our own taxpayers, by reducing our own liabilities, not just in our energy costs, but our future exposure to carbon pricing, by getting ahead on electrification and everything else. And the big exciting one for me, and I'm glad Bill mentioned it, hydrogen, for example, solves a whole bunch of storage issues with renewables, especially in a place like ours that's very, very dark for big portions of the year in the winter when we need energy the most. And so, you know, I was reading the part in the report about coal phase out, which we've done a great job of here in Alberta over the last few years. A lot of it's been to natural gas, but the last power plant that the city built before our power utility was forced to be privatized by our provincial government just got retrofitted to a natural gas plant. But here's the good news, that those turbines can take hydrogen. So if we can figure out how to unlock the hydrogen economy in this country and on this continent and be energy exporters to the world that's going to continue to need products like hydrogen, then that's again where this fearful narrative about the disruption of climate change can all of a sudden become a hopeful economic narrative in parts of the country that are afraid right now. So I'm really grateful for Bill's leadership and Sylvester's leadership and all the other mayors out there who are trying to depolarize this issue and find the opportunity in it for our people and our businesses.
Thank you so much, Mayor Iveson, and thank you so much to all of the mayors on our panel. David, back to you.
Thanks very much, Jillian, and thank you also to Mayors Peduto, Turner, Iveson, and Plant for their excellent remarks, and more importantly, for the excellent actions they're leading in their cities. Delighted now to introduce our final speaker, the Minister of Infrastructure and Communities, Minister Catherine McKenna. Minister McKenna, you have the floor.
Well, thank you very much, David. It's great to be with you, and I can't wait to read your book. I have it on my list. I've got a long list, but I know you understand the important role of cities when it comes to climate action. So I get really excited being here. It's a Friday afternoon, but what an awesome group of people who are just doers. I will start with Mayor Bloomberg. We saw a video. He and I have worked closely together on climate action, I think, since I got elected and was first Minister of Environment and Climate Change. And for convening C40 and really the ambition of C40 and really supporting cities, I think is so incredibly important. I've really seen that from the beginning because cities represent 40% of emissions, perhaps within the control of cities. And so we need cities to be part of the solution. And seeing Mayor Sylvester there, it's so awesome to see you because, and also Mayor Peduto, which we haven't met before, but I'll tell you a little story. It was a bit the dark ages in climate action in the United States. I was feeling a little demoralized as the Minister of Environment and Climate Change in Canada, where we were committed to the Paris Agreement. And I thought, okay, we're going to keep this going. We need ambition, and people cannot think that the Paris Agreement is in jeopardy. Not one person can stop the Paris Agreement or climate action. So one, I saw your tweet, Mayor Peduto, which Mayor Iveson just reminded me of. So you can all go check my Twitter and see it because you said, no way, Pittsburgh's in. I won't do the first part of that, but that was a really important point that was made. And then I went to visit Mayor Sylvester. I went to Houston because I thought Houston was a great example because we have some folks in Canada, sadly, politicians who still don't see the opportunity of transitioning to a cleaner future. And I think you're a great example of a city that people think is based on oil and gas, and that's part of your story. But you also had a whole other story to tell in a very positive way that focused on people and jobs, and you'd been through, pretty horrific times, but there you were. And so it was so great to be with you again. I feel like I'm supposed to be tight, but all these great people, obviously, Ben, you and I have worked together very closely when it comes to the Green Municipal Fund, the Canadian government. I think we put in $1 billion for Green Municipal Fund and projects directly with municipalities, and of course, 2 great mayors. Alors, la mairesse Plante, on travaille très fort ensemble sur beaucoup d'enjeux, and of course, Mayor Iverson. I don't know what we're going to do without you, so I guess we'll all stay tuned when you leave as Mayor of Edmonton. But look, I think what you guys have been talking about is so incredibly important. I could go through what we're doing with municipalities. I think one, we doubled the funding that we provide to municipalities, recognizing in COVID-19 it's really tough. So this is money that goes directly to municipalities through a newly renamed Building Canada Community Fund. And I know that's really important because you have to do the bread and butter of infrastructure, but we've been focused on everything from adaptation through the Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund to the new Green Community Building Fund. Stay tuned, going to be announced actually next week. And there are many, many other opportunities. Our public transit funding, I think, will be transformational. That is $15 billion in addition to the $25 billion we're already investing, and $3 billion ongoing every single year in perpetuity, so that mayors can have you can have clarity on long-term procurements and on major projects, but also electric buses and active transportation, which needs to be linked to public transportation. But I looked at the report because I know that's where you really want to hear about. I agree with your ambition. There's a great video out there that I'm going to find and tweet. It just showed how to become a net zero city. It was a Lego city, so I think that also helps. I quite like this. And they talked about how do you go from, you know, a regular city to be net zero. And it's everything you're talking about. It's retrofitting everything, but deep retrofits. It's a passive standard. That's something that we're investing in. The Canada Infrastructure Bank is also helping with the financing for major buildings. Clean electricity. We need to do everything we can. We're lucky many communities across Canada are off coal, but I know we talked about natural gas, and hydrogen for sure has a role to play, as you've said, Dawn. Smart mobility, we are making those investments. I think that will really help us. Yes, we need more ambition than 5,000 electric buses. It needs to be every single bus, and that's also a jobs play. That there are Canadian manufacturers, leading manufacturers of electric buses, and then of course nature. Nature has to be part of the solution, both to mitigate emissions, but also to help to adapt to the impacts of climate change. So you have a partner in the federal government. I also have, you know, we're going to wait for the budget because I think there are some other, I'm hoping other really good announcements, because we need to partner with you directly. We need to enable you to do what you do best, which is innovate, figure out how you can best reduce your emissions with diligence, though. Everyone needs targets and everyone needs to do, I guess, as Don Iveson is doing, his parting gift, making sure that you're building in this accounting, that you're building in your carbon budget, that you're really thinking hard about the dollars you're investing. Are they getting the returns? So a huge thank you to all of you, to our friends in the United States for continuing when it was tough times and showing that no one can stop climate action, and that cities and states often were leading the way. And of course, to my friends here in Canada, the mayors have been so supportive of climate action. They understand it, the Big City Mayor Caucus, but also, actually, we shouldn't leave out towns too. They've been doing a lot, and we need to be providing the financial support as well as some of the expertise to help support all of you to do that. So, you know, I'm all in. Our government is all in, and we're going to continue working together in Canada, but of course around the world, because it's just too important. It's about jobs, it's about inclusive, healthier communities, and of course it's about climate change and a more sustainable future for our kids. So we're going to take the ambition that we took to COVID-19, the focus on science and scientists, and on working together and on having a clear line of sight on what we do, and we're going to tackle climate change the same way. But thank you all. And once again, thanks to Mayor Bloomberg, wherever he is. Always a great time to be working with you folks.
Thank you very much, Minister McKenna, for your comments and for being present today on behalf of the Government of Canada. It's very clear from your comments that you heard very clearly the message of the report and the message of the great mayors we've had the privilege of sharing this hour with. And to me, that message is very simple. COVID-19 has revealed very starkly the unequal impacts of a major crisis, and has also revealed that we need to invest significantly to address not just a recovery from COVID, but as the research presented by Dr. Huxley shows so clearly, and as the mayors have commented, in order to avert the climate crisis, create huge numbers of jobs, and address public health issues all at the same time. And I think today's session has made me optimistic, because it's clear there's an understanding at the national level in Canada of the importance of urban climate action, and an understanding of everyone of the importance to invest massively to do that now. So with those words, I look forward to those investments starting. And for all of you participating today, it's time to close this event. I would like to acknowledge and thank all of the speakers, Minister McKenna, Mayor Iveson, Mayor Turner, Mayor Peduto, Mayor Plante, merci beaucoup, mon ami, and also Dr. Rachel Huxley and Councillor Ben Henderson. Thank you all. Thank you for this excellent event, and I look forward to working together to honor the commitments we've made here today. Bye-bye.